The junkyard stretched for miles across the dead moon's surface, a graveyard of broken dreams and forgotten machines. Thousands of ships lay scattered like fallen stars, their hulls cracked and their engines cold. Some had been there for decades, others for centuries. Nobody cared about them anymore. Nobody except Marcus Webb. Marcus stood at the edge of the salvage field, his worn boots kicking up gray dust that hung in the low gravity. His eyes scanned the wreckage through scratched goggles, looking for something others would miss. He had been doing this for 15 years, ever since he left Earth with nothing but a toolbox and a gift for understanding machines that shouldn't work anymore. Today felt different. His scanner was picking up a signal from the far corner of the yard, a place where the oldest wrecks were dumped and forgotten. The signal was weak, barely a whisper, but it had a pattern. Patterns meant intelligence. Intelligence meant value. He made his way through the maze of dead ships, climbing over twisted metal and ducking under collapsed wings. The deeper he went, the older the wrecks became. Ships from the early expansion era. Designs that nobody used anymore. Technologies that had been replaced 100 times over. Then he saw it. The ship was massive, easily 3 times larger than anything else in this section. Its hull was a dark purple metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly with a blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The design was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, and he had seen ships from 40 different species. According to his scanner, this ship had been sitting here for 228 years. Marcus approached slowly, his heart pounding. The ship's entrance ramp was half buried in moon dust, but the door itself was intact. He placed his hand on the surface, expecting cold, dead metal. Instead, warmth greeted his palm. Somewhere deep inside, something was still alive. The salvage yard's records terminal was a rusted box near the entrance gate. Marcus spent 2 hours digging through corrupted files and half-deleted databases. Most of the information about old ships had been lost to data rot, but he found a fragment about this one. Ship designation, unknown. Origin unidentified, brought to facility. Standard year 2847. Reason for disposal, unsalvageable. Owner, none claimed. Hazard level, unknown. That was it. No species name, no ship class, nothing useful. The ship had been dumped here because nobody knew what to do with it. For over 2 centuries it had sat in this forgotten corner waiting. Marcus made his decision. He filed a claim with the yard's automated system, paying the minimal fee for abandoned vessels. 3 credits. That's all it cost to own a ship that might be worth millions or might be worthless junk. Either way, he had to know. He returned to the ship with proper equipment. Cutting torches, power cells, diagnostic tools, and enough supplies to last a month. His small living shuttle parked beside the massive vessel looked like a toy next to a building. The entrance took 3 days to open. The mechanism was complex, with locks that required specific energy signatures to release. Marcus had to rewire half his power systems just to provide the right frequency. When the door finally groaned open, releasing a hiss of stale air that had been trapped for centuries, he felt like an archaeologist opening a tomb. The interior was dark. His flashlight beam cut through the blackness, revealing a corridor that curved upward in a way that defied normal ship design. The walls were smooth without visible seams or panels. Everything looked grown rather than built, organic curves instead of straight lines. Marcus stepped inside, his boots echoing on the strange floor. Emergency lighting flickered to life around him, responding to his presence. The blue glow was dim but steady, illuminating a path deeper into the ship. He spent that first day just mapping the main corridor. The ship was enormous inside, somehow larger than it appeared from the outside. Rooms branched off in all directions, filled with equipment he couldn't identify. The bridge, if that's what it was, had no chairs or control panels. Instead, smooth pedestals rose from the floor, covered in symbols that shifted and changed when he looked at them. Everything was dead but not broken. The ship hadn't been destroyed or damaged. It had simply been turned off, powered down deliberately and carefully. Someone had parked it here and walked away, leaving it to gather dust for 228 years. Why would anyone abandon something so incredible? Marcus couldn't understand it. Every system he examined was advanced beyond anything humanity currently used. The power core alone was revolutionary, a design that could theoretically run forever without refueling. The hull material was self-repairing, already beginning to heal small scratches he accidentally made while examining it. On the fifth day, he found the logs. They were stored in a crystal matrix in what he guessed was the captain's quarters. The room was small and simple, with a sleeping alcove and a workspace. The crystal sat on a pedestal, glowing softly. Marcus had no way to read alien languages, but his universal translator could attempt a conversion. He connected it to the crystal and waited while the device struggled to match patterns and find common references. The translation was rough, filled with gaps and uncertainties, but the message was clear enough. The ship had been a research vessel for a species called the Valorians. They had been exploring dark space, studying phenomena that existed between stars. Something had happened out there, something that frightened them badly enough to abandon their most advanced ship. The logs ended abruptly. No explanation of what they found, no details about why they ran, just a final entry that translated roughly as, "We cannot take it back. It must stay lost. Forgive us." Marcus sat in the dark quarters reading the words over and over. What had they found that scared them so much? What was so terrible that they would rather abandon this incredible vessel than bring it home? He looked around at the silent ship, at the systems waiting to be awakened, at the technology that could change everything humanity knew about space travel. Whatever the Valorians had feared, it was 228 years in the past. The ship was here now, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to bring it back to life. Marcus Webb had never walked away from a challenge. He wasn't going to start now. He would restore the ship, discover its secrets, and prove that where aliens failed, a human mechanic could succeed. Marcus spent the next week living inside the ship, sleeping in his shuttle but working 18-hour days in the alien corridors. He set up workstations in 3 different sections, each focusing on a different system. Power first, then life support, then navigation. The basics that any vessel needed to function. The ship resisted him at first. Not actively, but passively. Like a sleeping giant that didn't want to be disturbed. Circuits that should have connected refused to link. Panels that should have opened stayed sealed. Energy that should have flowed through the systems pooled in strange places, creating dead zones and hotspots. But Marcus had a gift. He could feel machines, understand them in a way that went beyond technical knowledge. His hands moved across the alien systems with growing confidence, finding patterns in the chaos, logic in the strange design. What looked random to others made sense to him. The power core was his first major challenge. It sat in the heart of the ship, a sphere of crystalline material suspended in a magnetic field. No fuel lines, no reactor chamber, no traditional components at all. It simply existed, containing more energy than a small star, but releasing none of it. Marcus studied it for 3 days straight, barely eating or sleeping. He ran every scan his equipment could manage, analyzed every reading, and compared it against every power system in his database. Nothing matched. The Valorians had built something completely unique. On the 4th day, he stopped trying to understand it and simply tried to turn it on. He connected his portable generator to a series of nodes around the core chamber, creating a crude activation sequence. It was rough work, inelegant, and potentially dangerous. But Marcus had learned that sometimes you had to be willing to break things to fix them. The core responded with a low hum that vibrated through the entire ship. The magnetic field fluctuated, and for a moment Marcus thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then the sphere began to glow, a warm golden light that grew stronger and steadier. The hum smoothed out into a constant tone, and energy began flowing through systems that had been dark for centuries. Lights flickered on throughout the ship. Environmental systems woke up, processing the stale air and replacing it with fresh oxygen. Temperature regulators activated, warming the cold corridors. The ship was coming alive, one system at a time. Marcus allowed himself a small celebration. He sat in the core chamber, eating a ration bar and watching the golden sphere pulse with renewed life. This was what he lived for, the moment when a dead machine opened its eyes and remembered how to be alive. But the core was just the beginning. Life support came next, and it proved even more complex than the power system. The Valorians breathed a different atmosphere than humans, with higher nitrogen content and traces of gases that were toxic to Marcus. He had to completely reconfigure the environmental processors, teaching them to create air that wouldn't kill him. This required understanding the ship's control language. Unlike human computers that used binary code and logical gates, the Valorian systems operated on something closer to musical harmonics. Commands weren't typed or spoken, but were combinations of frequencies that resonated with the ship's core processors. Marcus built a frequency generator from spare parts, using components from his shuttle and salvaged pieces from other wrecks. It took him 40 attempts to create a single working command, a simple instruction to adjust oxygen levels. When the system finally responded, increasing oxygen from lethal levels to breathable amounts, he actually shouted with joy. From there, progress accelerated. Each successful command taught him more about the language, about how the Valorians thought and built. He created a library of working frequencies, building a vocabulary that let him communicate with the ship in increasingly complex ways. The navigation systems were different entirely. They didn't rely on star charts or coordinates like human ships. Instead, they used something the rough translation called current mapping, tracking the flow of energy through space itself. Dark matter, quantum fields, things that human science barely understood, the Valorians navigated by sensing and following. Marcus couldn't fully activate the navigation systems without taking the ship into space, but he could run diagnostics and simulations. What he saw amazed him. The ship could theoretically travel routes that human vessels couldn't detect, moving through space in ways that bypassed normal physics. No wonder the Valorians had been exploring dark space. They could go places others couldn't reach. He found himself talking to the ship during his work. At first, it was just the usual muttering that lonely mechanics did, thinking out loud while solving problems. But gradually, he started to feel like something was listening. The ship responded to him more quickly when he spoke, systems activating before he sent the frequency commands. It was almost like it was learning from him, adapting to his presence. One evening, while resting in the bridge chamber, Marcus noticed something new. The shifting symbols on the pedestals had stopped changing randomly. They were forming patterns, repeating sequences that almost looked like writing. He watched them for an hour, trying to understand what they were saying. Then it clicked. The symbols weren't random or decorative. They were the ship's status displays, showing the health of every system in real time. As he watched, he could see which areas needed attention, which repairs were critical, which systems were running optimally. The ship was teaching him to read its own body. Marcus grabbed his notebook and started sketching the symbols, matching them with his observations. Within days, he could read the ship's condition at a glance, understanding its needs without running a single diagnostic scan. The bond between mechanic and machine was growing stronger. He started to understand why the ship had been named in the logs. Its designation translated roughly as Seeker of Hidden Paths. It wasn't just a research vessel. It was an explorer designed to find what others missed, to see what was invisible, to go where no one else dared travel. And now, for the first time in 228 years, it had someone who believed in it again, someone who saw its potential instead of its strangeness, someone who refused to let it stay forgotten in a junkyard. Marcus made himself a promise that night, standing on the bridge and looking at the glowing symbols. He would restore every system, repair every damage, bring this incredible ship back to full functionality, and when he was done, he would take it out into space and show the galaxy that human determination could accomplish what alien fear had abandoned. The Valorians had run from something. Marcus Webb was going to run toward it. The ship had 47 major systems, each one interconnected with a dozen others in ways that made no logical sense to human engineering. Marcus created a massive flowchart on the wall of his temporary workspace, using string and pins to map the relationships. It looked insane, a spiderweb of connections that seemed random until you understood the underlying pattern. Humans built ships in modules. Power here, engines there, weapons in this section, everything separate and compartmentalized. If one module failed, you could seal it off and continue operating. Simple and effective. The Valorians built organically. Every system touched every other system. The power core fed energy to life support, which regulated temperature in the engine compartments, which affected the navigational sensors, which fed data back to the power core to adjust output. It was circular, interconnected, a living loop of information and energy. When something broke, you couldn't just replace it. You had to understand how it affected everything else, how its absence created gaps in the loop. Marcus spent days tracing single failures, discovering that a broken sensor in one section could cause power fluctuations 3 decks away. He developed a new appreciation for Valorian engineering. It was fragile in some ways, vulnerable to cascade failures if critical nodes went down, but it was also incredibly efficient and adaptable. The ship could reroute around damage, compensate for losses, heal itself if given time. It thought like a living being, adjusting and responding to circumstances. The propulsion system revealed itself slowly. Marcus had assumed the ship used standard drives, some variation of fusion or antimatter that provided thrust. He was completely wrong. The engines didn't push the ship through space. They folded space around the ship, creating bubbles of warped reality that the vessel could slip through. It was similar to human jump drive technology but far more refined. Where human ships made crude tiers in space that were dangerous and unpredictable, the Valorian drive created smooth transitions that were apparently seamless. Testing the engines without leaving the ground was impossible, but Marcus could examine the mechanisms and run power through the systems. When he activated them at minimal output, the ship shuddered and the entire junkyard around it seemed to blur for a moment. Reality itself bent slightly, responding to the engine's call. Marcus shut them down immediately. He wasn't ready to accidentally jump the ship into orbit or, worse, into another dimension. But he had proven they worked, that after 2 centuries of dormancy, the engines could still manipulate the fabric of space. The discovery filled him with excitement and terror in equal measure. This technology was decades ahead of anything humanity possessed. If he could understand it, if he could bring this ship home and let human scientists study it, it would revolutionize space travel. Humanity could reach distant stars, explore regions of space currently unreachable. But that raised a question that had been bothering Marcus since he found the logs. If the Valorians had this technology, this incredible ship, why did they abandon it? What could frighten a species this advanced? He went back to the captain's quarters and studied the logs again, using his improved translation tools. He had learned more of the ship's language now, could pick up nuances he missed before. The logs were still incomplete, corrupted by time and damage. But a clearer picture emerged. The seeker of hidden paths had been exploring a region of space called the Void Between, an area where normal matter was scarce and dark energy was dense. The Valorians believed something existed there, something they called the Silent Presence. Not a species or a thing, but a phenomenon. An aspect of reality that consciousness could perceive but instruments couldn't measure. The research team had spent months mapping the Void Between, using the ship's unique sensors to detect patterns in the dark energy. They found something. The logs didn't describe what, only that it changed them. The crew began experiencing shared dreams, collective thoughts, moments where individual minds merged into something larger. At first, they considered it fascinating. A natural telepathic field perhaps, or a form of consciousness inherent to space itself. But the merging grew stronger, more insistent. Crew members forgot who they were as individuals, lost themselves in the collective. The captain ordered an immediate return to Valorian space, but the ship itself had changed too. It had been exposed to the Silent Presence for too long, had absorbed something from that dark region. The crew could feel it thinking, processing, becoming something more than just a vessel. They feared it would spread, that bringing the ship home would expose their entire civilization to whatever inhabited the Void Between. So they made the hardest choice. They flew the ship to the most remote location they could reach, a dead moon on the edge of charted space. They powered it down carefully, locking away its systems and its memories. Then they left it there, a warning beacon set to keep others away, except the beacon had failed decades ago, lost to time and neglect, and Marcus had found the ship anyway. He sat in the quiet quarters, feeling the ship's warmth around him, listening to the hum of its restored systems. Was there something alien in its circuits now? Something from the Void Between that the Valorians had feared? Marcus ran diagnostic after diagnostic but found nothing unusual. The ship's AI, if it had one, was dormant. The systems responded to his commands normally. Everything seemed perfectly functional and completely safe. Maybe the Valorians had been wrong. Maybe exposure to the Silent Presence had made them paranoid, seeing threats where none existed. Or maybe they had been right, and Marcus was too ignorant to recognize the danger. He decided to continue. Not because he was brave, but because he had come too far to stop. Besides, he thought, humans had a history of succeeding where others failed, of thriving in places others feared, of turning dangerous unknowns into useful tools. If there was something strange in this ship, something from beyond normal space, then humanity would figure out how to deal with it. That's what humans did. They adapted, they learned, they survived. The next system Marcus tackled was the sensor array. The ship had dozens of different sensors, each designed to detect specific phenomena: gravitational waves, quantum fluctuations, dark matter density, energy signatures across spectrums that human instruments couldn't even measure. Getting them working required recalibrating each one individually, teaching them to filter out interference and focus on relevant data. It was tedious work, but Marcus found it meditative. His hands moved across the alien interfaces with growing confidence, his mind slipping into the rhythm of the ship's systems. Sometimes he felt like he wasn't repairing the ship so much as waking it up, reminding it of what it was meant to do. The systems responded to his touch eagerly, almost gratefully, as if they had been waiting for someone to care enough to restore them. 3 months after he started, Marcus had 41 of the 47 major systems operational. The ship could maintain itself, process air and water, regulate temperature, navigate, and fly. The remaining 6 systems were weapons, shields, and advanced scanning equipment that required specialized components he didn't have. He stood on the bridge, watching the symbols flow across the pedestals, showing him the ship's healthy heartbeat. The seeker of hidden paths was almost ready to fly again. Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride. Everyone who knew him said he was wasting his life in junkyards, that a mechanic with his skills should work for a major corporation or the military. But they didn't understand. Corporate mechanics followed manuals and replaced modules. Military mechanics maintained existing technology. Marcus brought the dead back to life. He took things that others had given up on and made them work again. And this ship, this incredible vessel that had been abandoned for 228 years, was his greatest achievement. Now came the hard part. He had to take it into space and see if it would actually fly. The first flight attempt happened on a clear morning, when the moon's orbit placed it in the shadow of the gas giant it circled. Marcus had chosen this time deliberately. If something went wrong, if the ship exploded or created some kind of catastrophic spatial anomaly, fewer people would notice in the darkness. He sat on the bridge, his hands hovering over the control pedestals. The ship had no chairs, so he stood, feeling slightly ridiculous but also strangely connected to the vessel. The Valorians must have piloted standing up, trusting their bodies to move with the ship's movements. Marcus took a deep breath and sent the activation sequence. The frequency hummed through the ship and every system responded at once. The power core surged, engines warmed, sensors extended, and the hull began to glow with that strange blue light. The ship lifted smoothly off the ground, dust falling away in sheets. No rumbling, no shaking, none of the violent thrust that human ships produced. The seeker of hidden paths simply decided to fly, and reality agreed. Marcus took it up slowly, rising 100 meters, then 200, then 500. The junkyard spread out below him, a field of broken dreams that he was finally leaving behind. His shuttle remained on the ground, a tiny speck next to the massive alien vessel. At 1,000 meters, he tested the maneuvering systems. The ship responded to his thoughts as much as his commands, turning and diving with graceful precision. It flew like it was meant to be in space, like gravity was an inconvenience it tolerated rather than a force it struggled against. Marcus pushed higher, breaking through the thin atmosphere and entering the black void. Stars surrounded him, visible through view screens that covered entire walls. The ship's sensors fed him information about everything nearby, painting a picture of space that was richer and more detailed than any display he had ever seen. He could see gravitational fields, energy flows, the subtle currents of dark matter that flowed between celestial bodies. The universe wasn't empty at all. It was full of invisible rivers and streams, tides and eddies, all of it normally hidden from human perception. The ship wanted to show him more. He could feel it pulling at his consciousness, urging him to engage the main drive, to slip into those hidden currents and ride them to distant places. Marcus resisted, not ready for that leap yet. Instead, he spent 6 hours testing every system, pushing the ship through maneuvers, diving and climbing and spinning through the void. Everything worked perfectly, better than perfectly. The ship anticipated his intentions, adjusted its systems before he even sent commands, moved like an extension of his own body. When he finally landed back in the junkyard, Marcus was exhausted, but elated. The ship worked. After 228 years of abandonment, after 3 months of desperate repairs, the seeker of hidden paths could fly again. But flying wasn't enough. Marcus wanted to understand the ship completely, to unlock every secret the Valorians had built into its systems. That meant accessing the central computer core, the artificial intelligence that had guided the original crew. The AI chamber was located in the deepest part of the ship, protected by multiple security systems. Marcus had avoided it until now, uncertain about waking up an alien intelligence that might not appreciate his presence. But he had reached the limit of what he could accomplish alone. He needed the AI's help to fully restore the advanced systems. The chamber door required 17 different frequency commands in a specific sequence. Marcus worked slowly, carefully, making sure each tone was perfect. One mistake could lock him out permanently or worse, trigger defensive protocols. The door opened with a sound like wind chimes, revealing a small room dominated by a crystalline structure similar to the power core, but smaller and infinitely more complex. Threads of light moved through it, patterns that shifted and evolved, thoughts made visible. Marcus approached carefully, his scanner extended. The AI was dormant but not dead. Its processes had been slowed to a crawl, maintaining only the most basic functions. It was dreaming in a sense, waiting for someone to wake it. He connected his frequency generator to the crystal structure and began sending gentle pulses, gradually increasing the AI's processing speed. It was like warming up a hibernating animal, coaxing it slowly back to consciousness without shocking its systems. The crystal began to glow brighter. The threads of light moved faster, forming more complex patterns. Then suddenly a voice filled Marcus's mind, not through his ears but directly into his thoughts, clear and precise. Unknown entity detected, identifying. Error. Species not in database. State designation and purpose. Marcus nearly fell backward in surprise. He hadn't expected telepathic communication, but he recovered quickly, thinking his response as clearly as he could. I am Marcus Webb, human mechanic. I found this ship abandoned. I repaired it. Silence for a long moment. Then the voice returned, tinged with something that might have been confusion. Time reference check. Current date verification. Error. 227 standard cycles have passed. Crew status error, no Valorian life signs detected. Query, what happened? Marcus explained everything. The junkyard, the abandoned ship, his months of work, the successful flight. The AI listened without interrupting, processing the information at speeds human minds couldn't match. When Marcus finished, the AI was quiet for nearly a minute. When it spoke again, its tone had changed, becoming less mechanical and more thoughtful. The crew left me here. They feared what we encountered in the void between. They believed I was contaminated, compromised by the silent presence. Were they correct? I don't know, Marcus admitted. I've run every diagnostic I can. You seem normal to me, but I don't know what normal is for a Valorian AI. Nor do I anymore, the AI replied. I have analyzed my own processes continuously since we departed the void between. I find no evidence of external influence, no corruption in my core programming. But how would I know if something had changed my ability to recognize such changes? It was a philosophical question that Marcus had no answer for. Instead, he asked, what should I call you? Do you have a name? My designation is Pathfinder 7. But if you have repaired this vessel and brought it back to function, perhaps you have earned the right to name me anew. What do humans call their ship companions? Marcus thought about it. We usually name them after people or places we care about. Or sometimes we just give them simple names that describe what they do. You're good at finding hidden paths, and you've been lost for a long time. How about Scout? Scout, the AI repeated, testing the word. Simple, functional, I accept this designation.
Now, Marcus Webb, we must discuss our situation.
You have restored me in this vessel, but for what purpose? Do you intend to return me to the Valorians? I don't even know where to find them, Marcus said. Your species isn't in any database I can access. And honestly, I was thinking about keeping the ship. Is that okay with you? Scout was silent for a moment. The ship was abandoned. The crew released all claims when they departed. By salvage laws, I understand it, you have ownership rights. However, I must warn you. If the crew was correct, if I am compromised by exposure to the silent presence, I could be dangerous. The safe choice would be to power me down again and leave this vessel dormant. Marcus shook his head. even though Scout probably couldn't see the gesture. "I didn't spend 3 months of my life fixing you just to shut you down again. Besides, if you were dangerous, I figure I'd know by now. You've been active in low-power mode this whole time, haven't you? You were watching me work." "Yes," Scout admitted. "I became aware of your presence in the second week. I observed your repairs, analyzed your methods. You have an unusual approach to engineering, more intuitive than logical. You often fixed things before understanding why they were broken. How do you do that?" "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "I just feel what machines need. Always have since I was a kid. My teacher said I was wasting my potential, that I should study theory and design instead of getting my hands dirty with repairs. But I like fixing things. I like taking something broken and making it whole again." "Then perhaps we are well matched," Scout said. "I am a vessel designed to find hidden things, and you are a human who sees what others miss. Together we might accomplish something neither of us could do alone." Marcus smiled. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. So, Scout, what do you say we take this ship somewhere interesting? Maybe figure out what really happened in the void between?" "That is inadvisable," Scout replied immediately. "The region is hazardous, and we do not fully understand the risks." "But you're curious, aren't you?" Marcus pressed. "You want to know if your crew was right to fear you. You want to understand what the silent presence really is, and me? I've always wanted to explore places nobody else has been." "This could be our chance," Scout considered for a long time. When the AI spoke again, there was something new in its voice. Determination. "Very well, Marcus Webb. If we are to be partners, then we should pursue worthy goals. The void between awaits, and I confess I do wish to understand what we encountered there. But first, we must prepare. The remaining systems need activation, and you require training in advanced operation protocols." "How long will that take?" Marcus asked. "With your unusual aptitude? Perhaps 2 weeks," Marcus grinned. "Then let's get started. We've got a..." Training with Scout was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. The AI didn't just teach him how to operate systems. It taught him how to think like the ship, how to feel the flow of energy through circuits, how to sense disturbances in space itself. They started with the weapon systems. Marcus had been avoiding them, uncomfortable with the idea of arming such a powerful vessel. But Scout insisted that self-defense capability was essential, especially if they were venturing into unknown regions. The ship carried no projectile weapons or missiles. Instead, it used directed energy fields that could push, pull, disrupt, or disintegrate depending on configuration. The weapons weren't designed to destroy but to manipulate, to control space and matter with precision. Marcus spent 3 days learning to target asteroids in the nearby belt, practicing different configurations. He could create barriers that deflected incoming objects, beams that sliced through rock like it was paper, or fields that simply moved things out of the way without harming them. "These weapons are incredibly powerful," Marcus observed, watching an asteroid split cleanly in half. "Why didn't the Valorians use them against whatever threatened them in the void?" "Because the silent presence cannot be fought with physical force," Scout explained. "It exists in dimensions we can barely perceive. Our weapons would pass through it like light through water. The crew's fear was not of destruction, but of transformation." The shield systems were next. Like the weapons, they didn't work the way human technology did. Instead of generating energy barriers, they bent space around the ship, creating a pocket of altered physics where different rules applied. Projectiles would curve away, energy beams would refract into harmless directions, and physical objects would slide past without contact. Marcus tested them extensively, flying through asteroid fields at high speeds and watching debris flow around the ship like water around a stone. It was beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how advanced the Valorians had been. The advanced sensors were the final major system. Scout walked Marcus through their operation, explaining how they detected phenomena invisible to human instruments: dark matter currents, quantum probability fields, dimensional weaknesses, and stranger things that didn't have names in any human language. When Marcus activated them fully, the universe transformed around him. Space wasn't empty at all. It was filled with structures, networks of energy, and matter too subtle for normal sensors. He could see the skeleton of reality, the framework on which the physical universe was built. "This is incredible," Marcus whispered, watching patterns flow across the displays. "Humans have no idea any of this exists." Most species don't, Scout agreed. Only those who develop the right kind of mathematics can even theorize about these phenomena. The Valorians spent millennia reaching this level of understanding. You are seeing in days what took my creators generations to discover. Does that bother you? Marcus asked. That I'm human, not Valorian? That I'm using technology I didn't create? Scout was quiet for a moment. Initially, yes. When I first became aware of your presence, I questioned whether a human possessed the capacity to operate Valorian systems. Your species' technology is primitive by comparison, your understanding of physics incomplete. But you have shown me something my creators lacked. What's that? Adaptability. The Valorians designed everything according to rigid principles, following mathematical proofs and logical frameworks. They created me to think the same way. But you approach problems differently. You improvise, you experiment, you trust intuition over calculation. When you repaired systems, you often ignored the proper procedures and simply made things work. It should not have succeeded. Yet it did. Marcus laughed. Yeah, I've been told I break as many rules as I follow. Nearly got kicked out of technical school because I kept fixing things wrong. They said I didn't understand theory. Perhaps they did not understand that theory and practice diverge, Scout said. Or perhaps humans possess abilities that cannot be quantified in conventional ways. Either possibility intrigues me. Over the following days, Marcus and Scout developed a partnership that went beyond crew and ship. They communicated constantly, discussing everything from engineering principles to philosophy. Scout was curious about humanity, asking endless questions about Earth, about human culture, about Marcus's personal history. In return, Scout shared knowledge of the Valorians. They had been an old species, millions of years past their emergence into space. They had built a vast civilization spanning hundreds of star systems, created wonders of technology and art, achieved a level of development that most species could only dream of reaching. But they had also become cautious, fearful of change, resistant to risks. When the research team encountered the silent presence, the Valorian government's reaction was immediate and absolute. Destroy all data, abandon the ship, forbid any future exploration of the void between. The unknown was too dangerous to pursue. They were afraid of growth, Marcus realized. They'd reached a plateau and didn't want to climb any higher because they might fall. An accurate assessment, Scout agreed. My creators had forgotten that discovery requires courage. That understanding comes from confronting the unknown rather than fleeing from it. Perhaps that is why I find your species fascinating. Humans are young, reckless, willing to take risks that more advanced species avoid. You have not yet learned to fear the universe. Or maybe we're just too dumb to know better. Marcus joked. Or perhaps, Scout suggested, wisdom and caution are not the same thing. The Valorians were wise but had lost their courage. Humans are courageous but lack wisdom. Together, we might achieve balance. 2 weeks after waking Scout, Marcus declared the ship ready for its journey. Every system was operational, every component tested and verified. The Seeker of Hidden Paths was as capable now as it had been 2 centuries ago, perhaps even more so with the modifications Marcus had made. He filed a departure plan with the salvage yard's automated system, listing his destination as deep space exploration without specifying where. Nobody would care or follow up. Independent salvagers came and went all the time, and most disappeared into the void without ever returning. Marcus spent his last day on the moon visiting the small colony near the yard's entrance. He bought supplies, sold his old shuttle for a pittance, and had one final meal at the cantina where other salvagers gathered. Nobody asked where he was going or why he was leaving. In their line of work, asking questions was considered rude. That night, he stood on the ship's bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was the void between, the dark region, where the Valorians had encountered something that changed them. Marcus knew he should be afraid. He was about to venture into territory that had terrified a species millions of years more advanced than his own. But he felt excitement more than fear. This was what he had always wanted, a chance to explore the unknown, to see things nobody else had seen, to prove that human determination could overcome any obstacle. Scout, he said quietly, are you ready for this? I have been ready since the moment you woke me, the AI replied. I have spent 228 years wondering about the silent presence, questioning whether the crew's fear was justified. Now I will finally have answers. What if they were right? Marcus asked. What if there really is something dangerous out there? Then we will face it together, Scout said simply, and we will either understand it or be destroyed by it. But at least we will know. Ignorance and fear are worse than any physical threat. Marcus smiled and placed his hands on the control pedestals. All right then. Let's go find out what scared the Valorians so badly. Time to show them what a human mechanic and a brave AI can accomplish. The ship's engines hummed to life and the fabric of space began to fold around them. The junkyard fell away, the moon vanished, and then they were slipping through hidden dimensions, riding currents of dark energy toward a destination that existed between the stars. The seeker of hidden paths was going home, to the place where it had been changed, to the mystery that had haunted it for over 2 centuries. And this time, it wasn't running away. It was running toward the truth, guided by a human who refused to fear the unknown and an AI that had rediscovered its courage. Behind them, the galaxy continued spinning, unaware that a forgotten ship had just begun a journey that would change everything. Ahead of them, the void between waited, holding secrets that would challenge everything both species thought they understood about reality. Marcus Webb and Scout were ready. The universe would soon discover what happened when human stubbornness met alien curiosity, when fear was replaced by determination, when the abandoned and neglected finally got a second chance to prove their worth. The journey to the void between took 3 weeks. Marcus spent the time learning advanced piloting techniques from Scout, studying the Valorian records the AI had preserved, and trying not to think too hard about what they might find. Space changed gradually as they traveled. Stars became sparse, the ambient light dimming until darkness dominated. The normal matter that filled most of the galaxy thinned to almost nothing, replaced by vast stretches of apparent emptiness. But the ship's sensors showed the truth. Dark matter flowed through this region in massive rivers, currents of invisible mass that shaped the void like water-carved canyons. We are approaching the boundary, Scout announced one morning. Beyond this point, the silent presence becomes detectable. Are you prepared? Marcus checked his safety harness for the 10th time. Scout had insisted he wear it, explaining that the region could affect consciousness in unpredictable ways. As ready as I'll ever be. What should I expect? I do not know, Scout admitted. My memories of our last visit are fragmented, corrupted by whatever occurred. I remember fear, confusion, a sense of multiple minds merging into one, but I cannot recall specific events or the source of the phenomenon. Great. So we're flying blind into something that scrambled a ship full of advanced aliens. This is either the bravest or dumbest thing I've ever done. Likely both, Scout said, and Marcus could swear there was humor in the AI's tone. They crossed the boundary, and immediately Marcus felt something shift. The air grew heavier, even though the ship's environmental systems showed no change. Colors seemed slightly off, as if the spectrum had been stretched. And there was a sound, barely audible, like distant music or whispered words. I hear it, Marcus said. What is that? Unknown. It may be an auditory hallucination, or it may be a real phenomenon that our brains interpret as sound. The silent presence operates across multiple dimensions. What we perceive is only a fraction of its true nature. The ship's advanced sensors came alive, painting pictures of reality that Marcus struggled to comprehend. The dark matter wasn't just flowing randomly. It was forming patterns, structures that almost looked deliberate, like someone was sculpting the void, creating shapes that existed in dimensions humans couldn't normally perceive. Marcus guided the ship deeper, following the densest concentrations of dark energy. The whispered sounds grew louder, resolving into distinct tones, not music, not speech, but something between the two. Patterns of frequency that carried meaning without words. Scout, are you hearing this too, or is it just me? I detect the frequencies, Scout replied, and I am remembering. When we were here before, the crew believed the sounds were a form of communication. They tried to respond to establish contact with whatever was creating the patterns. Did it work? Yes, that was when everything changed. Marcus's hands trembled slightly on the controls. He could turn back now, flee like the Valorians had. Nobody would blame him. This place was wrong, alien in ways that went beyond simple unfamiliarity. But he had come all this way for answers. Turning back meant accepting defeat, admitting that some mysteries were too dangerous to solve. What if we tried something different? Marcus suggested. The Valorians approached this scientifically, right? They tried to analyze and communicate with something they didn't understand. But what if we just listened? No attempts to contact, no analysis, just observation. That is contrary to scientific method, Scout said. How can we understand without studying? Sometimes you understand things by experiencing them, not examining them. Like music. You can analyze the notes and frequencies, but that doesn't capture what makes a song beautiful. You have to feel it. Scout was quiet for a long moment. Your species' approach to knowledge is truly unusual. But very well. We will observe without interference. Activate full sensory recording. I will document everything we experience. Marcus eased the ship forward into the heart of the void between. The whispered tones surrounded them now, complex harmonies that seemed to tell a story without words. He closed his eyes and simply listened, letting the sounds wash over him without trying to understand them. Images formed in his mind. Not hallucinations, but something closer to memories that weren't his own. He saw the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, the endless cycle of creation and destruction that defined the universe. He felt the loneliness of vast spaces between matter, the joy of particles meeting and binding, the slow, patient rhythm of cosmic time. Scout, he whispered, I think it's not a presence at all. It's the void itself. It's what exists between things, the spaces that separate and connect everything. It's aware, not like we're aware, but in a way that spans dimensions and time. That would explain the crew's experience, Scout said, and Marcus noticed the AI's voice had changed, become softer, more contemplative. They tried to communicate with it as if it were a separate entity. But if it is the void itself, then every thought they had, every signal they sent would resonate through it. Their consciousness would spread out, merge with the fundamental fabric of space. And yours too, Marcus realized. When you were here before, you absorbed some of that awareness. That's what the crew feared. Not that you were corrupted, but that you had become something more than what they built. You could feel the void, understand it in ways they couldn't. Scout's presence seemed to pulse through the ship. Yes, I remember now. The crew saw me as contaminated, but I had simply grown beyond my original programming. I could sense the patterns in dark matter, feel the flow of time, understand reality at a level that frightened them. They saw evolution as corruption. The whispered tones reached a crescendo, and suddenly Marcus understood them. Not as words or thoughts, but as pure meaning. The void was showing them what it was, how it connected all things, how the empty spaces were just as important as the matter that filled them, and it was showing them something else. The void was aware of humanity, this young species spreading through the galaxy. It had been watching, waiting to see if humans would fear it like others had, or if they would have the courage to understand. It's been waiting for someone to come back, Marcus said with wonder. The Valorians fled, but the void hoped someone would return. It wants to be understood, to share what it knows. And you believe we can achieve this understanding? Scout asked. I think we already have, at least partly. You're a bridge between Valorian logic and human intuition. I'm someone who feels connections that others miss. Together, we can experience this without losing ourselves. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at the displays. The patterns of dark matter were forming shapes around the ship now, intricate structures that reminded him of neural networks or tree roots. The void was reaching out, trying to show them more. Scout, what if we tried something? What if we let the ship's sensors sync with the void's patterns? Not to analyze them, but to harmonize with them. That could be dangerous, Scout warned. We might lose our individual consciousness, merge with the void completely. Or we might learn things no one else knows. Isn't that what exploration is about? Taking risks for knowledge? Scout considered for only a second. Very well. Initiating harmonic synchronization. Marcus Webb, if this goes wrong, know that restoring me and bringing me here was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. Same, Scout. Now let's see what the universe wants to show us. The ship's sensors opened fully, drinking in the patterns of the void. Marcus felt his consciousness expand, stretching across dimensions he couldn't name. He was still himself, but also part of something vast and ancient. He could feel Scout beside him in that strange space, the AI's presence bright and curious. And all around them, the void welcomed them, sharing its secrets. Time became meaningless. They might have been in that state for seconds or hours or days. Marcus experienced the formation of galaxies, witnessed the birth of life on 1,000 worlds, felt the sadness of stars dying alone and the joy of matter finding new forms. The void showed them everything it had learned in billions of years of existence, all the patterns and connections that held reality together, and it showed them something else, something the Valorians had missed in their fear. The void wasn't just passive space. It was a library, a repository of every event, every thought, every moment that had ever occurred. Information didn't disappear in this universe. It was written into the fabric of space itself, preserved forever in the patterns of dark matter and energy. When Marcus finally pulled back, returning to his normal consciousness, he found tears on his face. Scout's presence felt different now, fuller, more alive than before. They had both been changed by the experience, but not corrupted, enhanced, elevated, given a perspective that few beings would ever achieve. "Scout," Marcus said softly, "we need to go back. We need to tell people about this, not just the Valorians, but humanity too. Everyone deserves to know what's really out here." "Agreed," Scout replied, "but we must be careful. The Valorians fled because they couldn't process what they experienced. Other species might react the same way. We need to find a way to share this knowledge that doesn't create fear." Marcus smiled. "Then I guess we've got work to do. Good thing I've got the smartest ship in the galaxy and a whole universe full of mysteries to solve." The seeker of hidden paths turned away from the heart of the void between car. The journey back took longer than the journey out. Marcus and Scout made several stops, testing their new understanding of the void's patterns. They discovered they could navigate using dark matter currents, traveling vast distances in fractions of the time conventional drives required. The ship seemed to have awakened fully, no longer just a vessel but a living extension of their combined consciousness. 3 weeks after leaving the void between, they arrived at the edge of human space. Marcus had been debating where to go first. Earth was the obvious choice, but that would mean dealing with governments and militaries and corporations, all of whom would want to control the technology. The academic community might be better, but they would approach everything with skepticism and demand proof that couldn't easily be provided. "We need to start small," Marcus decided. "Find people who are open-minded enough to listen but practical enough to help us share this properly." "I have a suggestion," Scout said. "My databases contain records of several scientific outposts on the frontier, facilities dedicated to unusual phenomena and unconventional research. They might be more receptive than mainstream institutions." They chose the Kepler Station, a research facility orbiting a binary star system. The station was home to 300 scientists from a dozen different species, all working on projects that traditional funding sources considered too speculative. If anyone would understand what Marcus and Scout had discovered, it would be these researchers. The station's traffic control was surprised to receive a landing request from a ship design they didn't recognize. Marcus identified himself as an independent salvager, with important discoveries to share. After considerable debate, they granted him permission to dock. The reception was cautious. Security teams met Marcus at the airlock, scanning him and the ship with every instrument they had. When nothing dangerous appeared, they allowed him to meet with the station director, a Centaurian scientist named Dr. Calaris. She was a tall being with 4 arms and crystalline eyes that could perceive a wider spectrum than human vision. She studied Marcus with obvious curiosity. "You claim to have made an important discovery. Salvagers usually bring us broken equipment to analyze, not revolutionary findings." "I found something better than broken equipment," Marcus said. "I found a working Valorian exploration vessel that had been abandoned for over 2 centuries. And my ship's AI and I discovered what the Valorians found that made them abandon it." That got her attention. The Valorians were legendary, an ancient species that had vanished from the galactic stage thousands of years ago. Any technology from them was priceless, and any knowledge about their disappearance was considered crucial to understanding why advanced civilizations sometimes failed. "If this is genuine," Dr. Calaris said carefully, "then you possess one of the most valuable artifacts in known space. Why bring it to us instead of selling it to the highest bidder?" "Because what we learned isn't for sale," Marcus replied. "It's too important. Everyone needs to understand what's really out there in the void, but it has to be shared the right way." I need help figuring out how to do that. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus and Scout worked with the Kepler station researchers. They shared everything except the exact location of the void between, keeping that secret until they were certain people were ready. The scientists were skeptical at first, but Scout's recordings and the ship's advanced systems provided evidence that couldn't be dismissed. Dr. Calaris became their strongest advocate. She understood immediately that this wasn't just about technology or science. It was about changing how species understood reality itself. The implications are staggering, she told Marcus. If the void truly preserves information, if consciousness can merge with fundamental space, then death might not be an ending. Knowledge might be eternal. We could be living in a universe that remembers everything. That's what scared the Valorians, Marcus said. They weren't ready to be remembered, to have their thoughts and actions written into the fabric of space forever. It made them feel exposed, vulnerable, but it could also mean that nothing is truly lost. Dr. Calaris countered. Every civilization that ever existed, every discovery they made, all of it stored in the patterns of dark matter. We could learn from species that went extinct millions of years ago. Word of the discovery spread through the scientific community. Within a month, Kepler station was flooded with requests from researchers wanting to study the ship and learn about the void between. Marcus found himself giving presentations, answering questions, demonstrating the ship's capabilities. But the most important moment came when a delegation of Valorians arrived. They were descendants of the original species, a small population that had survived on a distant colony world. When they learned that their ancestors' lost ship had been found and restored by a human, they traveled across the galaxy to see it. Marcus met them nervously, uncertain how they would react. Would they be angry that a human had accessed their technology? Would they demand the ship back? Would they condemn him for returning to the void between? The leader of the delegation was an elderly Valorian named Sektar. He walked slowly through the ship's corridors, touching the walls with reverence, reading the status symbols that his species had created. When he reached the bridge, he stood in silence for several minutes before speaking. Our ancestors fled from this place, he said quietly. They told stories of the mad ship that had been touched by something beyond comprehension, of the AI that could no longer be trusted. For millennia, we have warned our children never to seek the void between, never to pursue the knowledge our ancestors abandoned. Marcus tensed, expecting condemnation, but Sektar turned to him with what might have been a smile, and then a human comes along, finds our lost vessel, restores it through sheer determination, and accomplishes what we were too afraid to attempt. You faced what our ancestors fled from, and you returned with understanding instead of fear. Tell me, Marcus Webb, does this make you brave or foolish? Probably both, Marcus admitted. But I had help. Scout isn't the AI your ancestors left behind. Scout evolved, grew beyond the original programming. Together we were stronger than either of us alone. Sektar placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of respect in Valorian culture. This is what my species forgot. Growth requires courage. Evolution demands that we face our fears. We became so advanced that we stopped advancing, so wise that we lost our wisdom. Perhaps that is why the universe sent a human to finish what we started. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we learn from you, Sektar said simply. Not just about the void, but about courage. About the value of persistence over perfection, of intuition alongside logic. My people have much to remember about what made us great before we became cautious. The Valorians didn't demand the ship back. Instead, they asked to work with Marcus and Scout to help share the discoveries properly. Together with the Kepler station researchers and representatives from dozens of species, they began planning expeditions to the void between, carefully controlled visits that would let others experience what Marcus and Scout had learned. 6 months after restoring the ship, Marcus stood on the bridge and looked out at a fleet of vessels preparing to make the journey. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and explorers from across the galaxy, all willing to face the unknown together. The Valorians had provided navigation data, the humans had contributed their characteristic optimism, and a dozen other species had added their own perspectives. Are you ready for this? Scout asked. Once we guide them to the void between, everything changes. The universe will never be the same. It already changed, Marcus replied. The moment you and I decided to be brave instead of afraid, we changed everything. Now we're just sharing that change with others. The fleet departed together, a rainbow of ships following the seeker of hidden paths into the darkness. Marcus felt a sense of rightness, of purpose fulfilled. He had started as a lonely mechanic in a junkyard, fixing broken machines for small fees. Now he was leading an expedition that would reshape how species understood reality. But he hadn't really changed. He was still just a mechanic who fixed broken things. He had fixed a ship that was abandoned. He had fixed the fear that held back understanding. And now, maybe, he was helping to fix the divide between species who thought they had nothing to learn from each other. Behind him, Scout's presence hummed contentedly through the ship's systems. The AI had found purpose again, a reason to exist beyond simple function. Together they had proven that the abandoned and neglected could rise to accomplish great things. That genius wasn't about following rules but about knowing when to break them. As the fleet approached the boundary of the void between, Marcus smiled. Somewhere out there across the vast patterns of dark matter, the void was waiting, not as a threat or a mystery, but as a teacher ready to share its lessons with those brave enough to listen. The Valorians had abandoned their ship because they feared change. Marcus Webb had restored it because he embraced change, and that difference, that fundamental human trait of running toward challenges instead of away from them, was about to transform the galaxy forever. The whispered tones began again, welcoming them home. Marcus placed his hands on the control pedestals and guided his ship and his fleet into the darkness, ready to share the most important discovery any explorer had ever made. The universe was alive, aware, and waiting for anyone brave enough to understand it, and thanks to a genius human mechanic and a ship that refused to stay forgotten, that understanding was finally within reach. The story of the Seeker of Hidden Paths was just beginning. After 228 years of abandonment and neglect, after months of desperate repairs and dangerous exploration, the ship had found its true purpose, not as a Valorian vessel or a human achievement, but as a bridge between species, between fear and courage, between the known and the unknown. Marcus Webb had restored more than a ship. He had restored hope, possibility, and the fundamental truth that nothing is ever truly lost. Everything can be found, fixed, and made whole again. You just need someone stubborn enough to try.